just send me, and then I'll apply it back to something that doesn't work.
Sarah, I'd give it just a couple minutes as people are trying to get in.
Okay, Travis, did you see John Last's question about recording?
This is being recorded. I didn't see the question.
I think he's asking if he can record from his computer.
I don't believe so. I don't know about that. But we'll have a recording of it.
Well, we certainly wouldn't have an objection if he's able to do it. That's tip.
We're all good. We'll just get the feed from you later if that's you're going to have that for us. That's not a problem. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your patience. Travis, are we still waiting on some folks, or do you think everybody's in?
I think you're good to go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Actually, Jackie's going to kick us off today.
Okay.
Yes. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Bonomo, President and CEO of PennFuture, a statewide environmental advocacy organization that works on clean air, clean water, and a healthy climate. I'm speaking to you from my home in northeastern Pennsylvania. My job today is to welcome you on behalf of those responsible for today's release of Our Water, Our Future, a common agenda for Pennsylvania's Lake Erie watershed. The common agenda was shaped over the last 5 months in dialogue with any number of concerned citizens, community activists, organizations, leaders, and technical experts who agree on 3 things. First, that Lake Erie is the lifeblood of their community, and that a clean Lake Erie is the key to unlocking a healthier and more prosperous future for all that live and visit here. Second, that clean water is being compromised by a host of urgent threats, from lingering impacts of past polluting industries to climate impacts to present-day developments that resist prioritizing community and environmental impacts over profits. And lastly, that everyone who lives here has a right to have their voices heard, and that many more mechanisms are needed at every level of decision-making to elevate community concerns and to have them processed and incorporated by decision makers in a transparent and equitable manner. The common agenda is comprehensive in its treatment of all barriers to a cleaner Lake Erie, but balanced in the sheer amount of opportunities, from small steps to sweeping policy changes, that we hope will capture the attention of decision makers here. And lastly, on behalf of PennFuture, I want to thank everyone who was part of this important process to develop the agenda. PennFuture looks forward to working with all of you and those of you not yet at the table to help put these ideas in the agenda into action. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Sarah Bennett. Sarah is PennFuture's campaign manager for clean water advocacy here in Erie, and she's been a driving force and intellect behind the agenda, and she'll walk you through some of the highlights. Sarah?
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. As Jackie said, my name is Sarah Bennett. I'm the campaign manager for clean water advocacy for PennFuture here in Erie. I'm here today to present Our Water, Our Future, a common agenda for protecting Pennsylvania's Lake Erie watershed. This document has been a collaborative project between PennFuture, 12 partner organizations, a technical advisory committee, 3 social justice reviewers, and contributions from many other people and organizations working on water quality issues in Pennsylvania and the Great Lakes region. The agenda describes several threats to clean water in the Lake Erie watershed, including direct threats like surface runoff, climate change, plastic pollution, invasive species, and legacy pollution, as well as indirect threats like lack of collaboration and racial inequities. We describe the impacts of each of these threats on water quality and recommend many solutions to address them. Most of the solutions are directed toward policymakers at the municipal, county, and state levels, but there are non-policy recommendations as well. The Common Agenda partners created this document with the premise that water is Erie's most important asset. In addition to providing drinking water for over 240,000 residents in Erie County, it also supports a $40 million fishing industry and attracts tourists who contribute $1.2 billion to our economy each year. It provides opportunities for recreation, scientific research, and developing a connection to our natural world. It's difficult to find an Erie County resident who doesn't have a personal connection or story related to a creek, Presque Isle Bay, or the lake. That being said, there are people living in the city of Erie who do not have the connection they should to our abundant water resources due to limited accessibility. Walking or biking to the waterfront from many city neighborhoods requires crossing the Bayfront Connector or Bayfront Parkway. Beaches are even more difficult to access without a vehicle. For example, a person living on the east side of Erie would have to transfer at least 3 times by bus just to get to the park. And once there, travel around the park would be difficult. But this document is not meant to criticize. It's meant to call attention to threats and inequities, suggest solutions, and promote collaboration to implement solutions that will lead Erie to a more equitable and sustainable future that protects our most important natural resource, our water. Erie's in the midst of an important revitalization. Public and private funds are pouring into the region to help these efforts, and many people are working on innovative ideas to reimagine Erie's future. However, important pieces of sustainable revitalization are missing. Erie needs to carefully consider the impacts of development on its water resources and current residents to ensure that decisions are made that promote long-term transformation rather than short-term economic gains. Erie's past is full of examples of polluting industries, and their impacts continue to this day. We should learn from the past by implementing better protection for our natural resources. The Common Agenda recommends several ways this can be done while making more equitable and inclusive decisions. Among the lessons we should have learned from the events of 2020, including COVID-19 and social unrest due to ongoing racial inequities, are that we need to build communities that are more resilient to future stressors, whether those are pandemics or climate change. We've also learned that when they have the time, people flock to natural spaces. The abundant litter at Presque Isle State Park this summer demonstrates that when we use these resources without care for our impact, without providing resources to protect them, we can cause a lot of damage. Finally, we've learned that we must be deliberate in addressing the inequities that exist in our society, or will undermine all the progress we've made to this point. Because if any group remains marginalized, we're not developing sustainable communities. I've lived in the Great Lakes region in my entire life. Like others who live here, I've taken for granted the abundant freshwater resources that exist in my backyard. It's only through deliberate and continued attention that we can protect these resources and ensure that they're abundant and clean well into the future. On behalf of PennFuture and our partner organizations, we invite Erie's residents, businesses, nonprofits, and government officials to work with us to protect Pennsylvania's Lake Erie watershed. Thank you very much for being here today. Next, I'd like to introduce Sister Pat Lupo, who among many other community organizations also serves as the co-chair of the Pennsylvania Lake Erie Watershed Association. Sister Pat?
Good morning. I'm an environmental educator and advocate for the Benedictine Sisters in Erie, and I teach at the Inner City Neighborhood Art House, and I'm involved in a number of environmental organizations and issues. I have lived and worked in the Great Lakes watershed most of my life. I interact daily with citizens, adults and students who are working hard to improve the quality of life in the Pennsylvania Lake Erie watershed. Water is essential to life. We must all understand the importance of water in our life and the life of the ecosystems that surround us. Clean water must be a priority if we are to protect human health and achieve our ecological and, yes, our economic goals. Through PLUA, the Pennsylvania Lake Erie Watershed Association, the Children at the Neighborhood Art House, and other groups, I engage citizens of our watershed every day. Our young people cannot make sustainable change in a vacuum. They must involve the stakeholders in our community. There are hundreds of partners from business and industry, government, civic organizations, universities, environmental and watershed groups, and citizens who are willing to work with our youth, local communities, and city and state entities to make a difference in our watershed. Let's gather together and implement the common agenda. The common agenda for clean water advocacy in Pennsylvania's Lake Erie watershed, spearheaded by Sarah Bennett of PennFuture, is the tool we can use to address the impact of the threats that have been identified by the diverse group of experts who worked for months to develop this initiative. As we discussed the threats that surfaced, throughout our discussions, prioritization was always based on the collective impacts to human quality of life, ecosystems and economy, and regional sustainability. The quality and quantity of our water is vital and must be protected if we are to achieve healthy communities where human health, healthy ecosystems, and healthy economies are valued and aspired to equally. And collaboration, outreach, and networking are essential if we are to develop citizens who will make informed, responsible decisions. Citizens who will be involved at all levels in working toward the resolution of environmental problems. As stated in the executive summary, let this common agenda be a catalyst for conversation. Let's work together with the unifying purpose of creating a vibrant, sustainable, high quality of life community where all Erie County residents thrive and our natural resources are protected for future generations. This is a great initiative. I've been very pleased to be a part of it. Thank you.
So next I'd like to introduce Dave Skelly. He's, again, among many other things, is president of Lake Erie Region Conservancy. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Good morning to everybody. As Sarah mentioned, I am president of the Lake Erie Region Conservancy. I'm on the PLUA board, Preservation Erie board. I'm a Mill Creek Planning Commissioner. Worked for the County of Erie as a planner for 29 years and was director there for 23 of those years. And I now work for Pennsylvania Sea Grant. I've been there 17 years, getting close to retirement. The Lake Erie Region Conservancy was incorporated in 2000. Its mission is to identify, conserve, and protect the Lake Erie region's unique natural resources. We also promote sustainable development. LERC has been working for 20 years to preserve green space that has ecological and recreational value and which is open to the general public for passive recreational uses. We own some land, we hold some easements. We've assisted state agencies with flipping property to their holdings. And we worked to help create Erie Bluff State Park, Avonia Beach Township Park in Fairview. And we actually went to court to conserve or protect, preserve, I guess, the Erie Golf Course from development. That's over 1,400 acres that we've been involved with over those years. LERC supports PennFuture's common agenda, and in fact is undertaking what this document's conclusion paragraph calls on Erie leaders to do, which is to promote clean water in our Lake Erie watershed by making, quote, protection and conservation a centerpiece of any renewed vision for the region. Ultimately, permanently conserving green space is the best means of protecting water quality. As a land trust, that is exactly what we do. But obviously, we're not going to conserve everything, far from it, nor would we want to. Development will happen. We want to encourage development, though, to as great extent as possible, to happen on previously developed land. As a member of the Mill Creek Planning Commission, and with our township largely built out, we aren't seeing many major subdivisions any longer, those that are 10 or more lots. We see very little development of that kind, like we did in the early 2000s when I started on that board. Instead, we're seeing land development plans where a lower density development, such as a house, is removed for apartments, or an older commercial use is replaced with another commercial use. Stormwater regulations that didn't apply for those previous uses now do apply to the new use, thereby reducing stormwater quantity and improving its quality. This is sustainable development. Since 2016 in Mill Creek, parking lots in new commercial developments must not have less than 7% planted green space with native deciduous trees on each end cap and a planted island every 15 parking spaces. These are for lots that are parking lots that are a half an acre or greater. There are lesser regulations for under half an acre. Those large parking lots also have to have a 15-foot wide median, planted median for every double row of cars. This is sustainable development. Oh, and on that median, you have to have a deciduous tree planted every 30 feet, and there has to be a bush every 10 feet between each 10 bushes between each tree. It's zoning, you have to be specific. A best example of smart growth and sustainable development is the reuse of brownfields, such as an old industrial area like GAF on the bayfront, or gray fields, such as any paved parking lot. And we have a lot of them. There are a lot of deceased parking lots in our town. In so doing, jobs are created in older, needier neighborhoods, and tax base is generated. And lastly, when development does occur in greenfield areas, we need to be smarter about how it's done. Conservation design, residential development, as opposed to the current standard of sprawling and often large lot subdivisions, is a much more sustainable way to develop. Under conservation design, the same overall density of development, meaning the number of units per acre, remains the same, or might even allow for slightly more density as an incentive bonus to developers than the standard way we now develop. This means that after the floodways and wetlands and steep slopes are discounted from the tract of land to be developed, the remaining developable area that is flat and dry is 50 or more % saved as common space for the residents. So you may have 2/3 or more of a tract of land remaining in green space, as opposed to how we do it now. The individual lots being prepared for development are much smaller, but open space views abound. That open space means habitat or sometimes farm fields are retained. Stormwater has more elbow room. Trails, bike paths can be installed. And importantly, property values remain high because everyone wants to be next to green space with views. That means a stronger tax base. It is also often less expensive to construct conservation design developments because the developer is paying less for linear footage of street, water and sewer, storm sewer, curbs, sidewalks, street lights, etc., making the bottom line profit a lot greener. In conclusion, conservation of open space, use of green infrastructure, smarter development, and restoration of brownfields, gray fields, and stream corridors will all go a long, long way to reduce flooding and enhance our Lake Erie watershed's water quality. These all create or enhance sustainable development. We look forward to a partnership with PennFuture in supporting sustainable development as a means of reaching the water quality objectives stated within the Common Agenda document. So thank you. And now I would like to introduce Laura Rubin of Healing Our Waters Coalition. You're on.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the opportunity to participate. Good morning, I'm Laura Rubin. I'm director of the Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition, effectively known as HOW. The HOW Coalition consists of more than 160 local, state, and national environmental organizations whose common goal is to restore and protect the Great Lakes, a resource that more than 30 million people depend on for drinking water. We have members throughout the 8 Great Lakes states, and the coalition is a nonpartisan coalition. So this morning, I want to say a few words about the importance of Great Lakes water protection and how this agenda fits into the Great Lakes regional goals. This blueprint for a restored Lake Erie and healthy communities is a huge accomplishment, getting all of these diverse partners to agree to share goals, strategies, and tactics. And I want to congratulate all of the partners who made this happen, especially PennFuture. The next step, this common agenda will require state and federal elected officials to act quickly before the problems get worse and more costly. Federal investments to restore the Great Lakes are producing results, but as this report makes clear, serious threats remain. This common agenda lays the foundation not only for protecting Lake Erie County's important resources, but it also provides a framework for sustainable growth and also for making decisions that will help address racism as a public health crisis and move Erie County towards a healthier future. We look forward to working with the local communities in Pennsylvania and across the region to safeguard and protect our clean water resources so that no one has to go without this basic human need. We strongly support the report's emphasis to bring to the table communities that have historically been left out of environmental decision-making so that the people who have disproportionately borne the brunt of pollution and environmental harm can be prioritized as we look to restore Lake Erie and the communities that rely upon them. I also want to make mention that these regional ecosystem restoration projects are the way to get things done. In these divisive political times, some of these strategies and goals in the common agenda might seem impossible or at least a reach, but we can still really get really good work done. And that's shown throughout these large ecosystem restoration projects. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has had 15 years of bipartisan support. And the key is bringing together these collaborative and bipartisan efforts. And so right now there's important work that needs to be done and it's time to get at it. The water problems are only getting worse and costlier to solve. Many of these efforts have key legislative actions in DC right now that are happening. Some of them have to do with prioritizing COVID relief funds that include a moratorium on water shutoffs that are affecting vulnerable communities and assistance to people and water utilities. Other initiatives include $335 million for Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding that will put people to work and create local jobs for drinking water and sewage treatment infrastructure, toxic lead abatement, and assistance for vulnerable and tribal communities. Supporting the Water Resources Development Act, which includes Great Lakes investments right now in water infrastructure, research, and community assistance, and investments in our drinking water and sewage treatment infrastructure that can help try to get at the more than $188 billion need for projects throughout the 8 Great Lakes states. So in conclusion, I want to again congratulate you all for the work on this common agenda and for your collaborative process. And we look forward to helping advance this common agenda going forward. Thanks. And now I'd like to introduce John Venko, who is the PennFuture Board of Directors.
Thank you. Hi, I really want to thank all our speakers, the participants today, and over the past, I don't know, 6 months or so, all the organizations and individuals who've come together under Sarah's leadership and urging and hurting to produce this wonderful document that, as Sarah points out quite correctly, is not meant to criticize. I mean, we can all talk about all the bad things that are happening all day long, but it's meant to quantify the problem, identify it in detail, and propose solutions to deal with it. It's an extremely positive document, and it has concrete recommendations both for public policy and for citizen action and engagement in addressing the issues that we all acknowledge exist. I myself, as many of you I'm sure know, am been active in culture and the environment in the community for a long time. I still had the Blues and Jazz Festival, which is a green festival and incorporates an environmental aspect as well as culture. Currently, I'm working with the Lake Erie Arboretum at Frontier on a large tree planting project, which is, I think, integrally connected to the water issues in our community. Certainly, one of our initial targets is riparian zones, those areas adjacent to creeks that take the water from our watershed into Lake Erie. And planting those zones with trees is really important to cleaning that water. And there are a long set of recommendations, and I hope everybody takes a really good hard look at this at the common agenda and finds a place for your action to take place. So without going on much longer, I wonder if any of the news organizations that are with us today have some questions for Sarah or Jackie or any of the other Penn Future people, or any of our speakers today. Reporters? Well, I don't know. Did that tell us that you've just done a job of answering all the questions in advance, Sarah?
This is John.
If folks,
Go ahead. It looks like we have John Last chiming in.
I found the news conference very informative. I'm going to ask Sarah some questions later on camera, so I will definitely be following up on some other questions later on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Rachel from WITF in Harrisburg. I'm just wondering, like, how do you see this plan being implemented? You know, where does it go from here, I guess, now that it's written out?
That's a great question, Rachel. So the next steps, we're going to spend the next couple of weeks really kind of rolling it out and introducing the common agenda to the community. In January, we're planning to have specific presentations for our elected officials. And from there, we're going to be continuing conversations, especially with our elected officials, to start implementing or having the baseline conversations to implement some of the actions that are here. So for example, Erie County Council declared racism as a public health crisis this summer. So we'll meet with Erie County Council to have start conversations to maybe to develop the Erie County Council Environmental Justice Community as a follow-up to that conversation. So that's just an example, but that will be my job moving forward is bringing the partners along to have those conversations. Any other questions? Rachel, did I sufficiently answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Just, I guess as a follow-up, I mean, have you talked to any lawmakers at this point who are engaged in the process or, supportive?
So we have had some initial conversations with lawmakers. PennFuture and other watershed partners across the Commonwealth held a Clean Water Education Week earlier this fall. And so we were able to introduce ourselves to a lot of our state representatives during that week through Zoom calls to talk about the importance of water protection and restoration in the budget cycle.
Rachel, this is Jackie Bonomo, president of PennFuture. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to add another dimension to Sarah's answer, and that is that we felt that it was incredibly important to have the voices of the community first and foremost shine through in the ideas and recommendations that the agenda is presenting. There's going to certainly be an opportunity to have lawmakers shape and move into implementation of some of the ideas. But you'll see that throughout the document, there was a real expression of need for the voices of the communities and all neighborhoods across the city and county to just be coming through in ways that were much more influential and much more, and having lawmakers acknowledge those voices in much more transparent ways. And so a big centerpiece of the recommendations has to do with the mechanisms and pathways for that to happen. So it's a long way of saying that the elected officials are key as we move forward, but in truth, our priority was ensuring that the voices of the community were heard through this document.
Thank you.
This is John Last, the Erie News Now. I guess while I have the entire panel here, I was kind of curious when I read through the document. Runoff was the number one listed problem. And I did a story not long ago on, I know City of Meadville has like a tax on runoff. They use it for their, I believe for their general revenue budget and things, but is that not what the document's about, not getting into taxes, or was that considered as far as maybe a deterrent to runoff? Was that explored at all?
So what the city of Meadville put together was a stormwater fee to help them implement some of the things that we call for in the common agenda, things like green stormwater infrastructure and improvements to stormwater infrastructure to help reduce the impacts of stormwater runoff. So that was addressed in the common agenda. So the city of Erie and Meadville Township, Mill Creek, not Meadville, Mill Creek Township have actually already gone through a feasibility study to look at implementing stormwater fees. Those would actually be different. Those would add funds to help implement some of these stormwater infrastructure upgrades that would better protect water quality. Right now, we're using infrastructure that's decades old, sometimes 100 years old, and there just aren't funds to implement upgrades. And so stormwater fees are definitely something that are called for in the common agenda to provide funds to update that infrastructure, and especially incorporate green stormwater infrastructure that utilizes plants and other methods that kind of mimic natural habitats to slow down runoff, filter runoff, and reduce flooding before that water goes right into our waterways.
So the common agenda is in the plans calling for municipalities to at least look into that. And I guess looking back from what I learned, and you confirm this for me, is that the money will be used for stormwater projects to correct it, and municipalities can use their other monies that they would normally spend for that, for other things. So I could correctly say that all the organizations and everyone involved with this is maybe calling for this to look into this stormwater fees.
Yes. Laura, did you want to add? It looked like maybe you were.
Yeah, I was just going to add a little bit more of a regional perspective. Stormwater fees and stormwater utilities are something that is very common throughout the Great Lakes. Some states use them very effectively, Ohio in particular. Some states are still grappling with it. But yes, these stormwater upgrades and this infrastructure usually falls on general fund money, which is competing with police and fire, whereas our drinking water and wastewater have dedicated utilities to improve those. And so a stormwater fee or utility can be a very effective way to address this aging infrastructure, and especially the effects we see in flooding and sewage overflows. So it's been very effective, you know, especially combined with some ordinances also that require green infrastructure.
Does anyone else have any questions for us? I know we have a lot of people on the phone. I just wanted to share that Travis has shared that we will be hosting a public webinar tomorrow starting at noon. People can register at PennFuture.org. That will provide a lot more details about this common agenda and things that we call for.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the media. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thanks.